Welcome to another edition of Play It Through, and this time around it's Faxanadu, brought to us by Falcom, Nintendo, and Hudson. Now, Falcom is famous for creating the Yeast series as well as the Dragon Slayer series. Now, Faxanadu is kind of a spin-off of the Dragon Slayer series, but the only real connection between this game and the Dragon Slayer series is the fact you get the Dragon Slayer weapon as the ultimate sword in the game. Faxanadu is one of my all-time favorite games for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and even though it does have some control issues, which we'll get into later, it still holds up pretty well as a solid adventure title for the NES with great action, as well as telling a story and item collecting that makes an adventure game, well, an adventure game. So here we go with Faxanadu for the Nintendo Entertainment System. We start off with a nice scenery, nice background and all, and we can see the famous Wonder Tree in the background there, which basically the entire game will be taking place within or around or on that tree. And we start off with at the base of the tree, walking into the hometown of our main hero, who is nameless. You actually can name him in the Japanese version, but in this version, the American version, he doesn't have a name. And basically he went on a long adventure, he comes home, and all of a sudden, crap's, messed up. The walls are crumbling, there's now a whole lot of people going on, he's wondering what the heck is going on. Now, you can really just go around, you can find out a lot more stories just going ahead and talking to a lot of people. But for this playthrough of the game, I'm just going to spend as little time as possible focusing on the story and get to the actual action and the gameplay, that people, probably would want to see more, I would assume. And we start off by talking to the guru, which is a priest. You're going to be seeing them a lot throughout the entire game. And certain gurus or priests are going to give us certain items that we're going to need later on in the game. That one, for example, gave us the Ring of Elf, which identifies us as an elf, even though the elves in this game, which are just like the generic main class, what you are, don't really quite look like elves. And your main adversary is the dwarves, who don't quite look like your average classic dwarves, but either way, I am an elf in this game. And we go to meet the king, and because of the Ring of Elf, it identifies us that we are an elf, and somehow we can talk to the king because we have that ring. And he's explaining to us that the well has dried up, and that since there's no water in the land, everyone's probably going to die soon if something isn't done about it. So he's going to give us a little bit of gold for us to buy some equipment and get ready to go on our adventure. Now, there is a glitch in the game which I will exploit. I won't exploit too many of the glitches in the game just to make it as close to what the creators of the game actually intended for you to do in the run. But there is some glitches in the game that can be used to exploit certain items and such. But anyway, he gives us 1,500 gold, and I'm going to start off by taking a martial arts lesson, which will increase my health a decent amount. I'm going to walk next door now and get to a magic lesson, which will increase my magic bar all the way up, or a good amount up. Throughout the game, though, for the most part, for getting my health and my items back up, I'm going to go ahead and there is these butchers in the game that I will be eating random meat from, dried meat, and that will be able to heal me, so I'll be using that to my advantage throughout it. Now heading back over to the right here, buy some of my random items that I'm going to need for my adventure. Start off with the random equipment. You don't start off with any weapons, so you need to go ahead and pick up some equipment. Here's where some of the issues you're going to see that what is going to make the gameplay of the game a lot longer is every time when you buy an item, it exits out the menu and you have to go back in. So even if you want multiples of the same item, you still have to go through each and every one of the little dialogue things each time you want to buy an item, which is a very pain in the butt maneuver. But this was an early NES title. This was 87 when the game came out, so it does have some problems with it, and I guess that would be one of my main issues. Also, throughout the game, you're going to need to buy keys in order to get into certain dungeons. So right here is the first key maker in the game. He makes J keys, which are Jack keys, and the keys are based on the highest cards in a card deck, or the face cards. There are Jack, Queen, King, Joker, and Ace. Now, the Jack, King, and Queen keys we can all buy from the key makers, but the Ace and the Joker key we only get one of them in the game, and we have to get them from a certain character in order to use on one specific door, and then we don't have to really worry about that key again. Now that I grabbed some keys and I spent all my money, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over and talk to the king again. Now he's going to give us the whole spiel again about everything he said to us the first time around. And just like the first time around, he's also going to give us 1,500 gold. So If you used all your money to buy some equipment, it's a good thing to go back in and get the money again so that you already have a decent amount of money and will buy a little bit more stuff before going ahead and continuing and actually start doing the actual gameplay of the game. So there's only going to be a few times within the playthrough of the game where I'm going to have to either grind or do a lot of dialogue scenes. This part at the beginning is actually probably the longest amount of time that I would have to spend preparing for the journey ahead. I'm going to do as little grinding or whatever you want to call it, money making in the game. There's probably only going to be one time where I'm going to have to sit down and spend a minute or two trying to get money, and that's only if I don't have a certain amount to buy a certain weapon that I really don't need to buy, but just to have it, it'll help speed up things for a small period of time against the normal enemies, because not too far after that, I'll get the best weapon in the game, which you find you don't actually have to purchase. Now, I'm not doing a 100% run of the game. I'm not going to go ahead and buy, I'm probably not going to buy the best spell in the game, which isn't necessary by any means, but also it takes a large amount of money in order to buy. Even at its cheapest, it takes a good amount of money to buy, and I'm not going to have that much at the time. I could eventually build up that amount of money, but it takes a good amount of effort to get that much money early in the game, so instead of spending like 20-30 minutes just collecting, 50 coins from a certain enemy each time I kill it, I'm just going to go ahead and continue on and not waste that too much time with gaining money and all that stuff. So I'll try to keep that part of it to the minimum. Now, as you've seen, I spent the extra money, I've got some extra stuff, including filling my magic bar all the way up, and now it's finally time for us, to get going in the game. I killed my first real enemy in the game, and I also used a jack key in order to open the first door, and now here we go into the world of Faxanadu. Now, like I said before, this game is very comparable to Simon's Quest, or Legend of Zelda 2, or even Battle of Olympus, where you're going through and you're going to have to go from town to town to find out what you're supposed to do next. And there's always clues in the game to figure out what you're supposed to do or where you're supposed to go. But it's one of those things that back in the day of the NES, since we didn't have sites like Game FAQs or have strategy guides for most games, it was a real challenge of trying to make it to the next part. Now, thankfully, this game did include a password system, and most of these games included some kind of backup, either a memory backup or a password system. The only real game that I always liked a lot that didn't have a backup or any kind of password was Rygar. And it was a great game, but it was a lot harder to figure out where to go to next than most of these games. And you didn't even have a memory backup or a password system to be able to continue on. Now, that was the second town of the game, which I didn't really need to stop in. There's no need to really stop there unless you need to refill your health real quick. Other than that, I usually just walk right through that town. I'm like, hey, look, I'm in a town, and let's just get going to the actual, first dungeon or first other area in the game. Now, all enemies in the game, as I'm going to use a jack key to get into my first dungeon, I think it's the Fortress of Stump, it's called, being at the base of the tree. But all enemies in the game drop usually something. Now, you have basically two drops. You have a coin drop, which can be a random amount of money, or they drop a piece of bread, which is a health upgrade. And it's not random, like sometimes they'll drop a coin, sometimes they'll drop bread. Like, for example, the hopping skull guys, they're always going to give me a coin, whereas that going back and forth spike thing, that spiked shell right there, and I'm going to kill it with a fireball, is always going to give me bread. So it's to your advantage if you have a screen with one of those bread guys and you need health to just go back and forth on that screen in order to build up a few pieces of bread just to get your health back if you need it. In this dungeon, there is the first boss of the game, which is really an easy boss, and it's the only real downside to the game is that there's only a couple of bosses even in the game. Really, only two. The two main, the final boss of the game and the one before the final boss of the game. The other one, even though they're big, giant enemies, and you have a boss music that goes for them, they're really not that challenging. But also, you fight them so many times that they're really not bosses in the end. It's like they end up just becoming like an advanced enemy. Like you have a smaller enemy, and then you have more advanced enemy. Now, as you can hear, this is the boss music of the game. And here's our first boss, this dragon that fires fireballs at us, but since I have my fire spell, I can just kind of hang out on this platform right here, and he can't get to me, he can't shoot me. And I just stand there, waste almost all my magic meter to go ahead and get him. Now, of course, For the later ones, I'm going to have to fight them more on an even playing field. I'll be on a flat piece of land, you know, I won't have an advantage being higher up or anything. So I'm going to have to go at them one-on-one, straight up, and I just have to time my jumping to get over the fireballs that he shoots out and hit him in the head when the opportunity